The NBA trade deadline is getting closer. February 6th, not that far away, and the center market is generating tons of buzz. We're going to talk about some of the big names out there on the center market that could potentially be changing teams. I'm Trevor Lane. This is the Basketball Bulletin. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Right now, only about 20% of you watching this video are actually subscribed to the channel. The other 80%, hit that subscribe button. You know what to do. It's free. Hit the subscribe button so you stay up to date. Joining me is Donnie Freeman. Donnie, I think we're going to have a really active trade deadline in the NBA, and I'm excited about some of these centers that we're going to get into today.
Yeah, I think that it's been already pretty active. There's a lot of rumors, but we've seen a few deals already, which is not typical. So I think that's got to be pretty optimistic for this year's trade season.
Well, let's take a look at this. This is Brett Siegel from Clutch Points, said among the players who have been the most talked about. Now, he was specifically referencing the Golden State Warriors as a team to be interested in some of these players, but saying the most talked about centers right now include Jonas Valanciunas, Nikola Vucevic, Chris Boucher. How about that? Day'Ron Sharpe and Nick Richards as being five of the more talked about centers. Now, we know Walker Kessler has certainly generated a lot of buzz as well, but if the Jazz really are saying we're not going to trade him, maybe that removes him from the mix. But of those players, which one of those players do you think would be the biggest like home run swing, would make the biggest impact on a team?
I think it depends on which team you're talking about, but just generally speaking, I think it's pretty safe to go for Vooch because he's the best offensive player here by a pretty wide margin. So he'd have the most outsized impact. That's easy for most people to see. But, depending on which team you're talking about, the defensive value or rebounding of a guy like Day'Ron could be really valuable as well.
Yeah, I really like Nikola Vucevic. The way he's producing this year, he is absolutely crushing it. He's been a 20-10 player. I think there's a fear, though, that he's going to wind up regressing. But even so, I don't think he's a bad contract.
You're not going to talk it into existence. You've been saying that for like 2 months. You're not going to speak it into existence.
I'm not going to speak what into existence? That the regression is hitting him.
No,
I don't want it to.
Forever.
I'm just saying that's what the math typically does, right? You typically see that regression kick in, but I hope it doesn't. I hope he continues to be great. I mean, $20 million this year. Look, as a 20-10 player, he's worth his contract. I think teams are just scared that he's 34 years old and that he's going to fall off the cliff.
Yeah. I mean, historically, you'd give up a first-round pick for somebody that's a 20-10 guy shooting what he does. But the worry is that he's as old as he is, like you said. And you're right. He is starting to play a little bit worse last time I saw. So there's that.
Right. But again, this is a talented player that I think could be a major difference maker out there. And it's exciting that there is a 20-10 guy out there that is readily available that you could get probably without having to give up a first-round pick. We're talking about second-round draft capital.
Correct.
That in and of itself is exciting if you're looking forward to a busy trade deadline. And I'll talk more about some of the other players, but first I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, and that is PrizePicks. PrizePicks does a fantastic job providing daily fantasy sports. You guys know we always appreciate it when you support the companies that help support us, help us keep the lights on, all of that. Use our promo code Bulletin. Get a guaranteed $50 when you play $5 over on PrizePicks. I'm going to make a few picks right now for some football games that are coming up today. We know the NFL playoffs are in full swing. I like Baker Mayfield more than 20 fantasy points. We've been calling him Laser Mayfield. If you've been watching the fantasy footballers, you know what that's all about. Baker has been fantastic for Tampa Bay. I think he's going to continue to do so against Washington. I also look at say Bucky Irving. If Baker's going to have a big day, do I go in on Bucky? Probably not, but he's been absolutely phenomenal for them. Jaden Daniels, I love the rushing upside with him going up against Tampa Bay. That's a tough rush defense, but I still think he can get that done. So I'm going to go for a big-time shootout in Washington against Tampa Bay, and I'll go Baker and Jaden Daniels both to get more than their fantasy score there. And let's face it, we got to go with their main wide receivers. Again, we're building a shootout scenario here. If Baker's going to have a big day, Mike Evans is probably going to have a big day, and Terry McLaurin probably going to have a big day as well. Although, you know what I actually like here? I actually like Jalen McMillan, the slot guy for Tampa Bay, to actually get a nice repertoire here of targets. So I think that's what we're going to see in this one. So that's what I'm going to go with. Those are my picks for that game. If you guys want to get in on it, go check out PrizePicks. Use the link in the description down below. Use our code Bulletin. Get a guaranteed $50 when you play All right, let's get back into the mix here with some of the centers out there on the market. Another name that got brought up, it was Jonas Valanciunas. And this is a guy who we know the Washington Wizards signed him specifically to trade him. They want to trade him. Whether or not they'll trade him right now, $9.9 million on the books, we'll see. But what do you think about Valanciunas as a target out there for a number of teams? Specifically, Brett Siegel from Clutch Points was mentioning the Warriors as being a team that could be interested in him.
I mean, he can provide what he provides. It's not going to change much, I don't think, for the Warriors, like their overall ceiling. Yeah. I think they could get more, size there, and he obviously can provide that, and he's going to give them 10 and 10. I mean, that's useful. My worry with Valanciunas is that he's just slow, so floor bound, excuse me.
Yeah.
That he kind of gets played out of games, and I don't know if any team looking for him, especially the Warriors, is kind of going to be equipped to deal with losing one of their main guys. I don't know what they would do with him. So I don't really like that target specifically, but getting you 10 rebounds, again, pretty useful. So he's a good guy. He's just kind of ho-hum for me. Like, I don't know if I would personally be targeting him for any of my favorite teams.
No, I think you brought up a good point with he can get played off the floor so easily. Like in the right matchup, if you really need a rebound, he can certainly give you that. Yeah, but he's not an every night player, not for a good team, not anymore. That's just not what he is because of what you said. He gets played off. You put him in a pick and roll situation where he's going to have to play drop coverage, but even then, guards torch him. He is just not quick enough. And so as much as I like him and I like how he can be a bully in the post, the problem is he is very, very situational. And if you are a team that's looking to make a playoff run, like the Warriors or like most teams that would be buyers out there on the market for him, the problem is teams are going to exploit him. Teams are going to recognize that he's got a major weakness. And I mean, we've seen it now. Teams will go right after any weakness that they see. And I think that's exactly what they'll do with Valanciunas. So I would prefer some of the other guys. I look at every player that's on that list, which they can make a difference, but I look at all of these players, with the exception of Vucevic, as being a backup. I think all of these guys are very clearly in the backup center role. Chris Boucher, a little bit light, but can give you a bit more flexibility in terms of his defensive versatility. Day'Ron Sharpe is a monster on the glass. He is phenomenal there on the glass, but still pretty raw, needs to develop. He's a backup. And Nick Richards, I mean, it's just a quintessential 10, 15-minute night, backup big, doesn't have great hands, can occasionally block a shot, can do some things for you. So, but there's teams out there that could use bigs on the market. But are you looking at this as, if it's not Vucevic, any of these other four that get moved, are you just kind of underwhelmed if you're a fan of the team that's getting this guy?
Probably. I think there's, like you said, there's upside depending on who you're talking about, what team they're going to, what the current roster looks like for said team, how much they need a big. Like, I think that matters, right? But yeah, I think just Vucevic specifically, I just think that he's the best offensive player here, and that would stand out just so much. You could maybe make an argument that he's the worst or second worst defensive player here behind Jonas, but I just think that with the production you could potentially get from him, otherwise it's just too valuable. Whereas the other guys, I know that, we obviously cover the Lakers a lot. Laker fans are super in on Richards, but sure. I kind of wonder if some of that's just Laker fans have heard that and they just want Richards. I don't think he's bad. I think he's a good backup center, but I don't know if people are thinking he's going to come in and start alongside Anthony Davis, because he wouldn't. Like, I don't know if people are expecting him to play 20 minutes per night. He probably wouldn't, like things like that. But like, yeah, I wouldn't really be too excited about most of these guys, but there's nothing wrong with getting another backup center. Like, for example, an offensive rebounder the caliber of Sharpe could come in and just absolutely wreak havoc and generate more points for you simply by getting those. Offensive rebounds typically turn into open threes oftentimes. And if you're putting him on the right team that can get some open looks right there, then that's going to be huge for your team. So like a player like him, I'd really like actually in Golden State specifically because of that. And because they all also have such a high focus on the way that they offensive rebound as a team. I think he'd work there. And then back to Jonas, like, we talked about some of the deficiencies he has, but, if you just need a big body guy to plug in there and you say you wanted to have him to help you with bigger guys like Embiid or Jokic, and if you're the Lakers and you've got Anthony Davis on the weak side, I could see why that could be enticing. So just with all these guys, aside from Vucevic, I think you have to have just a couple of other discussions about them. I don't expect, Boucher, he's good. I don't expect these guys, the lesser known guys to really make a huge impact though.
I think the guy I am most excited about from this group, it's Day'Ron Sharpe. I think he's got the highest upside of any of these guys that aren't, Nikola Vucevic. But then from there, I do wonder, because like you said, some of these guys, if you're looking for a starter, you're looking for a real impact guy, Vucevic, but you got to get to 20 million in salary to get to him. But that's where I wonder if the center market can actually get expanded a little bit. Like the Raptors right now, here we are weeks away from the trade deadline, are known to be a little bit reluctant, hesitant to give up Jakob Poeltl. Could their stance change as we get closer to the deadline? I think he would shoot. I think I would actually take Jakob Poeltl ahead of Vucevic, just because I think he fits across the board a lot better with some teams. Now, if you're looking specifically for a three-point shooting big, of course, you're going to go Vucevic, but I'm a big fan of Jakob Poeltl. Robert Williams, where is he at health-wise? Is he going to be out there on the floor? If some way, and I know this has been talked about literally for years, if there's any way that he's healthy, and you believe he's going to be healthy from here on out, he probably shoots to the top of the list. So there's a few other players that could be out there at the center position that might mix things up. Another guy that we haven't heard a lot about lately, but was rumored to be on the market, he hasn't played this season, but Mitchell Robinson, he is a monster on the glass if the Knicks decide to make a move with him. So there could be some real options out there, both in terms of backup centers as well as starting centers, that maybe aren't quite being talked about enough right now. And I think it's going to create a very robust and very active center market as we get closer to that February 6th trade deadline.
Yeah, one thing I do think, though, for me is that I do think that the center market is interesting in that I think there's a lot of teams that could be in on getting some of these guys, even if we don't think they're 20-minute per night impact starters or whatever it is. I think that a lot of teams are looking for some of these guys because a lot of teams can use bigs right now. And it seems like the NBA is starting to shift back towards, you need a few bigs on your roster, ideally. And some of that's because of just the high level of play that we're seeing from a handful of bigs around the NBA. But a lot of teams are starting to try to skew that way. So I think that if you're a team that has a player like Poeltl, who's a very, very serviceable big, I do think would be a part of a playoff rotation, I think you might have a benefit of being able to sell very high on a guy like that, and get back more than you probably would otherwise, because I think a lot of teams are kind of thirsty for bigs right now.
Now, I do want to throw out one more name just to keep an eye on. I do not think he's actually going to be available, but we got to mention him, Miles Turner, expiring $20 million contract. Look, the Pacers, and maybe we need to talk more about the Pacers. Maybe we'll do something on them tomorrow, but they have rediscovered their pace of play. They've won their last 5 games. Their offense is looking like it's bouncing back into what we kind of thought they would be. So I don't think they're going to be a motivated seller with Miles Turner. I think they're going to be a buyer on the market. Don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying he's available. But if for any reason between now and the trade deadline, Miles Turner, the amount of money he wants from the Pacers, the amount of money they want to give Miles Turner on his next deal, if for whatever reason those two numbers are different, then game on. Then the Pacers have to look at moving him. Otherwise, they could potentially lose him for nothing during the offseason. I think he's young enough at 28, where I know the Wizards and the Nets are the teams with cap space. Typically, they're not going to be buyers big time on the market for a guy like a Jimmy Butler or something like that. But Miles Turner might be young enough to where they could talk themselves into throwing a big offer his way. So if for some reason the Pacers don't want to come to an agreement with Miles Turner, they don't see a number that they like, then maybe he gets onto the market as well. And boy, Donnie, if that happens, wow. I mean, then the market really blows up, because I think a lot of teams would love to get him.
He would be one of the most coveted players on the market just in general if he went out there, let alone the most coveted center option currently available. He'd be one of the most coveted guys, just period, because just what he could provide for your team, I would be really in on a Miles Turner potentially.
Absolutely. Well, the bottom line, I think we're going to have a pretty active trade deadline here. The center position, there's a lot of options out there. But what I want to know from all of you watching is who do you like the most that could be out there on this center market? Let us know in the comment section down below. Which player are you most in on for your team? Again, fire it off in the comment section and go check out our latest video all about the 76ers, the most disappointing team in the NBA, maybe, and Paul George perhaps being a bit bored with his assignments there. So go check that out right now.